heavy lift we're involved with right now is in applying the design thinking concepts that she briefed you all on yesterday, is towards stipends. Jamie and a group of individuals internally met regarding the stipends that we pay to instructors or educators that come either for training or a variety of different events here. One of the key concerns is we're listening to BAs out in the field talk to us about making sure that we're accountable or accounting for the fact that there's different educator agreements, the agreements that educators enter into at their local level with the districts, and to ensure that process is in place to identify those that might be on contract that day when they're coming up here or not, and that we're ensuring to meet IRS regulations or requirements as far as how they're paid too. So that's how we're making sure that, because we did have a recent, well, not us, but state finance had a recent audit with IRS, and there's concerns and findings related to the 1099 versus having someone in your payroll system, all those types of things. So along the lines of what the superintendent briefed yesterday, design thinking is actually, in the military uses it quite a bit, is a great set of tools that puts tools in the toolbox in order to ensure that there's both inclusiveness, and then we go through iterations of applying what the group feels is necessary to get to what right looks like across. So there's that. Also too, just as a follow-up on progress, we've set precise dates and who will attend for both the NES work group. So Chair, this is something that I know you've been tracking and wanted to occur. We started it fell off a little bit, but we're back on track with the NES work group. Several meetings have been set. I believe all the attendees are identified, like who's going to participate. There's still some appointments, for the most part, okay. There might be some appointments that need to be made, to get other individuals involved on that. Also, for the to from transportation, that's big participation on the from individuals on the Transportation Advisory Committee. They call it TAC, I guess, too. So anyway, we just wanted to make sure that the Finance Committee members were up to date on that, because we're anticipating that staff here, whether it's me, potentially Natalie, or other individuals that might represent or be part of these groups, will likely have to address at some point during the interim period the legislature on the progress we've made, or how we've determined or resolved some of the questions surrounding the to-from transportation calculation formula, and then also NAS as it applies to the rural school districts and all of that, and in addition to other factors that take place with NES calculations and different parts and pieces to that process. So those two things, just as a progress update for 1.1. Subject to any questions or concerns, that concludes the briefing on 1.1.
Board Member Hanson.
Just a procedural thing, the Transportation Advisory Committee is our group we put together.
Go ahead.
In statute, it's allowed for the board to have this advisory committee. In statute, it says it's made up of superintendents, business administrators, and transportation directors.
And is it called the Transportation Advisory Committee? Because the board doesn't usually have those. When it's called an advisory committee, usually that's an advisory committee to the board, and we have those resolutions that, so this might become confusing if it's not something that's been run through the board and set up by the board. That's my question about that. Because we have those specific advisory committees that have been set up by the board. And this is set up by code, but it's called an advisory, and they're advising the board. That's their responsibility to advise the board. So we might want to put a resolution or something in place that makes them official to the board, just so that it makes sense with everything else we've done.
Okay.
Thank you for all of that work. And there are superintendents on the NES committee?
There are, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, sir?
No. No. Moving on to 1.2.
1.2 is the perpetual section review, which consists of one section coming forward, This month it's Ben's section. We could also invite the section accountant for this. Do we have someone here, Deborah, to go over that? Yeah, come on up. Deborah. I guess Deborah's representing the section accountant. So there's two parts to this. There's a slide presentation of basically the structure of this, or of the section when they come to brief you on this. So we'll go through the slide presentation portion first. This one is a particularly easy one. There's only 1.5 FTEs that make up this section.
Long slideshow for you.
Yeah, long slideshow.
Where's the rest of it?
3 slides. Let me see if I can find it here.
I like the flow chart though.
I worked hard on that.
I'll just display it too, so the public and individuals in the board, in the room here can see it. So Ben, I'll flip the charts for you, all 3 of them.
Okay.
So if you just go ahead and advise the committee on your organization.
Sure, so-
and what you do.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices here. So like Scott said, my staff, I have a staff of 5, but my section, with the law section, there's 1.5 there basically, because it covers half of my salary and my legal assistant civil. So there's 1.5 FTEs under the school law side of it. The UPAC side of it, you probably heard a couple months ago, is covered under teaching and learning. So that's covered under a different budget. But so there's 2 of us that fall under the school law budget. You want to advance the other slide, Scott?
Sure.
So basically, there's a few things primarily that our section does. I work with Superintendent Stallings on a lot of rule and policy drafting that you see through your committee and board process. I'm the agency records officer, so I coordinate all the public records request responses, and we're working on updating retention schedules and improving the agency's records management through that part of the section. We coordinate the fee waiver policy documentation that we receive from LEAs at the beginning of the school year. We provide constituent support on different questions as they get phoned into the office. And I'm also the commissioner for the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children. So we coordinate the state's obligations under that compact. So those are the basics of what my section does. Is there any questions about that?
I have a question. It says coordinates agencies' public records request. Is that grammar requests?
Yes.
How many grammar requests do we get for every month about?
We probably get, on average, about half a dozen a month.
Okay. Thanks.
It's gone up a little since we added the procurement to the office. We get a lot of the requests are for RFP records.
Okay.
As an integral part of this agenda item, we also do a review. It's, based on time, at the time of the review. So this is as of March 31st, right, Deborah? So, which is also a piece out of your overall monthly budget report that you received from me during the entire board meeting. What the intended purpose, again, of these section reviews is to give you a shot in time, so to speak, of the particular section that's advising you, or if there are issues, we would bring them up at this point. We don't necessarily have an issue with this particular budget or this particular section at the time. So subject to your review of the report that's in the board backups, that concludes the section review for this month.
Chair?
I'm sorry, I should have asked one of these questions earlier, but I had 2 questions on this review. You have 1.5 FTEs. You're not asking, but apparently that's sufficient to take care of.
Yes, that covers our staff. Like, half of my salary is covered under the teaching and learning budget along with UPAC, but we don't have any staffing issues in this section.
And then on your budget and on the budgeting, that seems to be satisfactory also.
Yes.
Okay. Chair, those were my only 2 questions.
Oh, that brings me to another question. If we were going to create a situation where we started to be more proactive on teaching ethics and our standards, would that be coming out of your budget? or would that be coming out of another budget? And, because we have been toying with this, so
You're talking as far as providing training, or what do
Yeah.
you mean by being
Ethics to
proactive?
who?
to our teachers that are LEA specific.
Yeah, I guess that's something we would have to discuss. I know that, like, the UPAC side of things has its own budget through
Uh-huh.
teaching and learning.
Yep.
But I could certainly see that it could fit under there if that's how the board wanted to structure it.
Under the UPAC. Or-
If
yeah,
if
I
the
would-
board wanted
I
to
would
structure
agree.
it that way.
Okay,
I
because that is
think
something I was
because-
toying with,
Because it's
so-
part of the licensing,
Mhm.
you know, overall, and then the legal aspects of the training,
Mhm.
you know, ethics and all that too. I would see it as a better fit in that particular budget than this one.
So as we move forward to next year's budget, fiscal year, do we want to start thinking about putting that in there, or do we want to find money
Yes.
afterwards?
So yesterday, in the board meeting, you approved the base budgets
Uh-huh.
so that we can, you know, they're loaded in the system, we can progress on that.
Mhm.
We can come back if you so move or have an agenda item to come back and revise or basically brief you on whether or not there's enough funding within that budget
Mhm.
to sustain or implement ethics training and all that. We need to know the scope though.
Mhm.
You know, if the staff would have to really kind of go out and get an idea about how many people we would be training, whether we'd go to them or bring
Mhm.
them up here, you know, those types of things
Yeah.
too. So if we could get that type of guidance
Mhm.
to analyze that or whatever, we'd be able to come back and say, hey, the budget does support this, or no,
Mhm.
let's use some unrestricted money, we can move it into that budget, you know, depending on what the scope of the trainings are. I think we need to do that analysis first, but we could certainly look at the UPAC section, or the budget
Mhm.
within licensing to support whatever the scope is of the trainings you're looking at.
Because when I renewed my license, I had to take an ethics test, and it's not a great test. And it's provided by the state, and then Granite District has provided a PowerPoint now. But when we look across the whole entire state, we're all having unique experiences, and I would like to provide that local control, but I'd also like to have a safeguard in place for people that don't have that resource.
Okay.
So, as we talk about it, I just want to make sure that we are not asking for something after the fact, when we've looked at budgets and made all these decisions, and just to keep that in the back of our head, or simmering on the back burner somewhere, that if this becomes a situation, we want to make sure we have funds allocated for it.
Sure.
I can say my
Board
question.
Member Hanson?
Well, and my concern is, you know, do some districts like Alpine, Granite, the bigger ones, do they
Mhm.
already have something in place?
They do.
And maybe it's just something that we need to provide for other districts. I don't know, that's something we're gonna have to weigh, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
And see if, you know, if that's something we want to do or not.
Sure.
Something that wasn't mentioned is, I mean, we can look at budget, but then do we also have as you're going down this road, Vice Chair Reeve, if we go down that road, one of the biggest challenges, I don't think it's gonna be so much about the money, but it's, do we have bandwidth with our employees to take on
Mhm.
this proposed betterment that you're talking about?
Mhm.
So that'd be another part of that consideration, because we're looking for money. Money sometimes has a tendency to buy people, buy additional FTEs to make
Mhm.
something work, but I think that bandwidth piece, or the employee bandwidth piece, ought to be part of that consideration.
I appreciate these comments and these thoughts. I think I have two big concerns, and I think many of you share them. The first being that I think many of our teachers and administrators don't entirely understand what sexual grooming is. I think we should be blunt. You know, what triggers it, when it has to be reported, and then how to handle it. I think we're seeing too many meltdowns on that issue. Second, I'm concerned that our UPAC staff might not have the resources when a teacher clearly crosses the line, and then so we investigate that, but then they were abruptly terminated at another LEA. Are we investigating what happened there? Because I want to go, not just treat the superficial problem, but go deeper. And so that, A, people know when they need to report sexual grooming, and second, that teachers that have a problem get cut off early, because this is historically proven to be a chronic problem with people. They don't change unless they're caught, unless they are either disciplined and or, get help. And this seems to be mushrooming right now. And so some more resources spent, I think, on training, statewide, and then on follow-up, so people know there are consequences. If you don't report, and this person goes and causes a problem, it's gonna come back to bite you. And I think we're starting to realize that. I don't know if we have the manpower or the resources to do that. So maybe we ought to put that on the agenda for next month here in the Finance Committee. Both of those things, I think, I think it's not fair to some really good teachers and some really good administrators who haven't been trained in how to do this. I mean, for example, let's say a 14-year-old girl becomes friends with a teacher on Facebook, and they both like a rock band, and they engage in a long conversation about the rock band. Is that grooming? I mean, what is that? What does that mean? What is an administrator supposed to do about that? And then what if he even said, hey, I'll be at this rock band's concert Friday night, it'd be fun to see you there. And then what if he sees her there and he buys her a t-shirt of the rock band? I mean, it's such a waterfall, and it's so complicated. And they just need to have a hotline and know it's either obvious or I can call a hotline. And districts like Alpine and Granite have no excuse if every single teacher administrator doesn't have a law hotline where they can talk to someone legally, about those things, promptly.
Switched on.
And I'm going to pull up the example of the LDS Church. The LDS Church certainly has challenges, I think, that are very similar to a number of our LEAs.
Sorry, sir, the cords are, go ahead, we're listening.
And the LDS Church has created a hotline. It's at my law firm, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, any bishop can call, because bishops are not experts in sexual grooming. They are not called, and teachers are not experts in sexual grooming. Neither are principals. Unfortunately, they need to be, and they should have a resource they could call 24/7. I don't know if we need to create that at state level. I think people are calling UPAC now all the time, fortunately, and getting good responses. And so maybe that's what they need to do, but they need the training and to know what's out there. I mean, the cases that we hear at the state school board about teachers losing their license break my heart. I seriously feel probably less happy every month when I hear those cases. There's no way around it. It's tragic. And sometimes the other people will get sucked into it. So I think we can do better. So yeah, if that's all right, let's put it on the agenda next month and talk about what resources we need to do to get the training out there, and even the resources to go, I think, to the second level. Meaning if a teacher crosses a line at one LEA, we don't just investigate that LEA. We go back to the previous LEAs and find out why they were terminated.
So Chair, you're welcome to make a motion if you want. It'd be probably more appropriate to make a motion of exactly what you want brought back. And then we can better, because as I was tracking the conversation, it was lasered in on a couple of things, went really broad, wide, and then kind of came back a little bit to manage your expectation of what needs to come back. If we can get a motion, I think that would be.
A motion on next month's agenda, we discuss finding potentially additional funding for two things. One, training for everyone who has a teacher's license on when to report and handle sexual grooming. I want to get that narrow. Because I don't think we should be broad. I think we need to be that narrow.
So currently, as a teacher, when you renew your license, you are already required to take a test that outlines all of these policies in some kind of way. So we don't need to create that. We need to look to see if it's meeting our expectations, I think. So we could
Excellent.
review that test. Does everybody know what test I'm talking about?
I've never seen that.
Okay.
Let's get a brief,
Yeah.
board members.
Maybe
Let's
that-
get a brief
Okay.
done.
I was just to say, we reviewed that test with law and licensing
Okay.
shortly before the new board came in,
Uh-huh.
but we could certainly discuss it with you and talk to you how you'd like to see that improved.
And I'm all for local control and letting districts have their own decisions, but I think that if we have local control, we should make sure that all of these ethics and ethics should be touched upon, because I do know that teachers are frequently confused about what is appropriate and what is not, and I don't think there should be any confusion in what's appropriate and what's not. And since some of these policies were created, we have social media, and we have Twitter accounts and Instagram, and that creates a whole nother layer of stuff that lets people get themselves into trouble sometimes. But I'm not asking to have a top-down, heavy, imposed thing. I'm just saying, let's just really try to encourage education instead of remediation.
And that's a really simple question. I bet there's confusion on. In Granite School District, can a teacher be a friend with a student on Facebook?
I would highly recommend that not happening.
They have a policy against it.
Mhm.
They have a policy against it,
So
so you
formally,
cannot,
you cannot.
you cannot.
So that would be, clear evidence. If you were friends with a student on Facebook, there would
But
be
isn't it interesting that
discipline.
Kathleen wasn't sure, so maybe teachers don't generally know that that is the
Mhm.
policy.
Well, the reason why if you have you can create a classroom Facebook page, and then you're friends with everybody. So when you say, can you be Facebook friends, in what context are you talking? So you'd have to say all the specifics around it.
Okay.
Sure. Maybe it would be good for all of us and good for the whole board to just, this next month in our finance meeting, have this come before us and get an update on what our, we're talking about other, there's expectations, lots of expectations. There's your personal expectation. Then there's expectations of the board, expectations that a district sets that are a little different, or has, that's different than ours. And of course, when you go to parents' expectations, every one of them's unique. So we might want to reel it into the part of what do we do as a board, and where do we stand, what do we have in policy regarding your concern, that we have a minimum expectation on LEAs. And let's have that come back and basically brief you and brief us, and if we see weaknesses in it, then we start down the road of bringing those betterments forward. So I think we can have that on the agenda, but I think we deal with our own expectations first, and what we expect out of LEAs. And then sharpen the saw.
Okay.
Or go broader, or not broader, but get more into the details of some of these other concerns. I recommend that. You have a motion to bring it back.
I have a motion, okay, so here's my motion. My motion is that we bring it back next month and discuss if we have adequate funding for training on sexual grooming, and we have adequate funding to go to the second level, meaning when we investigate and we find misconduct at an LEA, do we have enough resources to then go to, if the teacher came from another LEA and was terminated there, to go and find out? Maybe even if a second or a third LEA, how many times did they get passed around, and were proper procedures followed? Yes, because I think we need to send a chill every time they terminate someone for any sort of misconduct with students. Do we report it or not? And they better think long and hard and err on the side of reporting. And that's what I want to send the message. So I guess, do we have enough funding to do those two things? And can we make those two things happen? There's my motion.
You don't need a second.
I don't need a second, you're
So
right.
we'll vote on it.
Janet taught us. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, thank you very much. I think that's all for the budget review. Thank you. You guys have a tough job. We appreciate your hard work. .3. I think this might be our favorite topic of
Yes.
2018.
So, sir, we need the committee's help here. If you'd invite David Thomas up to, Deborah's gonna be here too, just in case there's questions on, Is it okay? Is it okay if the AG comes up, sir?
Please,
So,
please.
okay. Here's what we need. There are some, if you'll scroll down, Jamie, like the first one here, we need to basically fill in the blanks here, get a little more specificity to the items that, or I guess the meetings that are blank on the furthest right-hand column. Do you want to compensate and pay travel? Do you not? Do we want to say nothing at all for those particular identified meetings or committees, or, you know, however they're determined on the far left-hand column? We did take action in the sense that we did move funding over to support any and all of these. We just need specificity, though, to whether or not, again, along the lines of compensate, pay travel, per diem, or both, or one or the other, because you will see others that there's no compensation, but there's travel and per diem for them, you know, et cetera on that. We really need to take concerted effort, subject to the committee's will here, to get these blanks filled in, just so board members are clear, you know, if they're, at any time, if they're one of the designees or they're participating in this, or, you know, and so that you all should be aware that Lorraine has a form that board members would fill out, you know, and we need to make it clearer on this, whether or not, you know, again, is it compensation and travel? Is it just travel? All that. We just feel that would be a very productive use of your time today to set conditions and standards for the way ahead, especially going into the next fiscal year, if we can do that. I know it might take some time today, but we just really need your help on that, or on this particular task. So can we just start from the top, or how do you feel about it, sir?
Well, before we get down the weeds,
Okay.
I'm really interested in both your thoughts and Chair's thoughts, maybe others. I think we have two competing things here. One, I think we want to be crystal clear on what is and what is not.
Okay.
So when people accept an assignment, they know.
Yes.
And I think that is a good practice. And I think the second thing is we have to operate within our budget. And it would be bad to create an expectation and then run out in, I don't know, February or March or April of money. And so people who go to meetings in May and June are like, I know we said this, but we don't have any more money. So maybe it's the tendency to maybe be a bit more generous on it, and then maybe reevaluate in December, and then see if we need to roll it back a little bit to then be in the budget. That approach would seem to make sense to me, but I'm really interested, Deputy, and
So to that second point about the budget, doing this exercise today, or this iteration where you help us identify specifically what will get compensated or not, really does help us forecast or formulate a budget to support to where we could come back in December and you know, advise you accordingly on what the execution rates are, how we're doing, all that too. But we do really need that specificity so that we can formulate a budget to support whatever it is. You know, is it compensation and travel for that particular meeting, or that, you know, requirement or commitment by a board member or board members. So to your second point, that's awesome. We're all together on that. We just need a little more specificity to what we will do or not do along those lines, so we can formulate and track.
Okay, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the other part of this is, Chair, as you're going through this, one of the challenges is gonna be is, why are you saying yes to one thing and no to another? So what makes, what passes the test for?
Criteria.
For compensation? What passes what are the parameters around the reimbursement on travel, you know, the per diem and travel? So we can go randomly and just start grabbing things, but it's still it will come back to why yes? Why are you saying yes to one thing and no to the other? And explaining that to other board members that think, well, that is not right, that's not. So here's our opportunity to roll our sleeves up and get it.
So when I look at this, there's a glaring group of people. One says invited, appointed, and created. So if we're creating it by board motion, maybe we should pay for that because we created it. If we've been appointed, maybe we should pay for that. If we've been invited, you don't pay for an invitation, you go if you want to. So, I mean, those are three big categories right there that I'm seeing. So maybe we can start there. Created, appointed, and invited.
Can I make another comment to Joel?
Yeah.
I think, at least my experience has been on the board, that we always get travel and per diem for whatever we do, even if we're going out and visiting our constituent schools and all of those things. So I would suggest that we should get travel and per diem for all of these, and that there shouldn't be an exception on that that's something that we should just get whenever we're out doing board business or work, working in our office.
It's like, for example, let's say a charter school is celebrating their 10th anniversary and invites us to their celebration. Or like Alpine School District has an annual legislative update they invite me to. And so those are small things, but I guess that would be by far the easiest approach. The board member Hanson, do you have a kind of something you wanted to tell us?
Well,
Dave?
there is this, is that just remember that in our, and this is for, because I like it, Scott, is that in the policy we created is that these will be funded to the extent that there is a budget. So there's a natural cap. In other words, I can imagine that on a monthly basis, you'd come back in and say, here's where you are on your travel, and, so govern yourself accordingly, is that we're running out of money, so these extraordinary, or these ones that might seem like a good idea, you might want to start, let the board members know that they need to pull back, their activities need to be circumscribed because you're running out of budget. Because even though Scott does seem like he's got money bags and that they're endless in nature, from what I understand is that, oftentimes you can have an unlimited budget that you can still exceed, and that's kind of where we are with this. And so I think there's a natural one, as long as the information is there. And so even though there may be designation is that our intention is to pay for these, there is the natural cap that you have.
It would seem that the ones that you're assigned, we should really try hard. Maybe on the ones that are not assigned or discretionary, it would seem reasonable unless the person all of a sudden started to have, $1,000, $2,000 a month on ones that weren't assigned. Has that ever been the case, Chair Huntsman?
Not that I know of. We've
Alright.
it's been very conservative, and a lot of board members don't put in on even reimbursements for mileage and other things, but it comes back to choices. And so by policy, we're saying that board members can choose, and this is part of this, they can choose a reimbursement or pass on the reimbursement. But I think the work today is, and I appreciate the comments on that Linda had on, because this is how we've been, when people have turned in reimbursement, that nobody's scrutinizing them, they're elected officials, and they fill out a form, you guys are all familiar with it, you say I was to here, here's my to and from, it's how long ago, did I need a motel, yes or no? That part of it, I think, will go really smooth, so it's really not that relevant. But the rest comes back to created, and I like where board member Reeby was at, was it created, appointed, or invited, and we can make it really simple on that. If they're invited and it wasn't required because of a really appointment, whenever something was created, you're basically appointed to it, somebody's gonna put you on there. That's the simplest way to govern that, is say, okay, yeah, you're eligible for compensation. If you're invited, you can choose not to go, and you're not. It's not like a requirement. But we had not had a run at the bank. I should say that I know of all while I've been on the finance committee, which has been, I don't know how many years now, 3.5 or so. with the run at the bank will be on the compensation side. That's what we'll have to watch. And we'll, from a leadership perspective, we'll have to kind of monitor and track from month to month, quarter to quarter, knowing what's upcoming. And if we have to reel it in, we do, or it's a budget thing. You move funds to pay for it. I don't think I helped you with anything. Just comes back to that. Whatever it is and it comes out of here, it's gonna go before the board so we can put this to bed.
Yeah.
I think we can just start, don't you think we can just start at the top and then go through all of them and say,
Yeah,
this is how this falls into our thinking and.
Let me raise one other issue. This is one that we discussed before, and that is that in our bylaws, we amended them pursuant to the Open and Public Meetings Act to make sure that we have electronic meetings are authorized under our bylaws, so that we can do that for the creation of a quorum and also for voting purposes. We have also suggested that if you participate in that way, that they are also subject to receipt of compensation. But that's within your discretion. You can say that if you do participate or don't participate, whether it's electronically or not, whether that is another, kind of a pinch point is to decide if you decide that you're going to participate electronically, that you won't receive compensation for that, even though you still can participate, or you can compensate it on the same basis as if you were actually physically there. That's one of the other pieces that I think you need to put in, because it has been raised as an issue.
So, can I ask a question here, Chair? So, when we talked about doing it for board meetings, it was because we were making it part of the quorum, but it probably wouldn't be the case when we go to maybe the STEM Action Center board. If we're not a voting member, then we're not making up the quorum, so is that the question? So if we come in electronically, do we still get paid for that? Is that the question,
That's a
basically?
wonderful distinction, and those are, I think, the kind of the nuances that you need to look at, and you need to decide whether or not that electronic participation is going to be viewed on the same basis as if you're physically there. And I think that that's a nice additional nuance you can put into this description.
Okay, I'm a little bit at a loss, but, I mean, do we want to go through, did we already kind of decide we want everything? And then we'll just get kind of monthly
Let's start at the
updates?
top.
Or are we gonna go through these and choose yes and no on some of these?
yes. All the appointed ones, we're gonna start as yes, all the invited ones, we're gonna say no, and then we're gonna tweak it back from there. Okay?
And if I may, I was remiss, I'd like to introduce Pat Gardner. She's Natalie's administrative assistant. She's covering for Cammie. So I just want to make sure that as you're discussing this, we capture what you're discussing accurately. So Pat, do you have this form, and are you able to,
I'm ready.
as you go in each block, she'll capture it in red. Now, Jamie is the one that's portraying this, so you won't see changes on this particular, on the overscreen, but Pat will track your discussion and for each one of these. And I would recommend we go along the lines of what Vice Chair Reedy just explained for the methodology behind getting to the specificity that your staff needs for this. And then I can do that, we can come back and we can make this a perpetual agenda item and track the monthly expenditures. So we're very transparent and to the public and where we're at as far as the budget goes and the support goes. Deborah and I can do that with you. So, okay?
One of the things we also discussed was the time constraints, so some of these are longer than others, and we suggested
true.
maybe making
That's a good point.
a half-day stipend versus a whole-day stipend. So when I look at the first one, it says appointed, so that would be a yes. Second one's invited, so that would be a no.
Wait,
Whoa, whoa,
can I
whoa.
ask about that? See,
Which
and
one
I
are
think
you
that's
on?
where we're gonna get into problems, because we're invited by the board, but we're appointed by the chair to be on those.
Mhm.
So the state
First
charter
one?
school board,
Mhm.
we're invited to be on, we're invited to have a member be on it,
Mhm.
but the chair appoints
Okay.
someone. So that person is actually appointed to be on that, so.
So let's go down the whole list and see how many yeses and nos we have, and then discuss that. So then we'll kind of have a better idea of how much money we're spending, and then we can go back and look at all the details, Linda, if that's okay with you? Because then we'll have a better idea.
I think we can go, I think we're all probably in agreement that
Yeah.
those are created by the board,
Mhm.
right? Are all yeses, so I think, don't you think we could probably fill in all of those,
Mhm.
right? Is everybody?
I think that would also cause us to create less task force as well. This is-
So I think all of those that are created by board motion, I
Mhm.
think are, but the others, it just probably is gonna depend on the
Mhm.
particular committee and what they're doing.
Chair?
Yes?
And just so I'm clear, and Pat's clear, what are we saying yes to? Yes, that
To the
Compensation.
compensation. Stipend
compensation.
of a whole day.
So did we decide that everything would be travel, per diem? Because that's really two parts to this.
Yeah.
We really need specificity on whether it's both compensation and travel and per diem,
Mhm.
or just, so I just want to make sure we're clear on when you start to go through and you say, yes, 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 what is yes? Yes to what?
I think we need to decide meeting, travel, and electronic.
Okay.
Why don't we discuss electronic first, because I think that would be easiest. My opinion is.
You don't get mileage for that one.
You don't get mileage, you definitely don't get travel for electronic. And if you only participate electronically, you don't get meeting or travel reimbursement.
I would agree with that.
If you participate a portion in person and then a portion electronic, you still get meeting pay.
Okay.
Are we in consensus on that? Chair Huntsman's grimacing.
Yeah, say that one more time.
So on.
Show up and then leave early, you still get.
Yeah, I'm back on your first one.
We're just discussing electronic. Let's get that off the table.
Okay. Electronic, of course, you won't have the,
Uh-huh.
any of the reimbursement travel, any,
Mhm.
okay, that's a no-brainer.
That's easy. And then on meeting pay, you don't get any meeting pay if you participate only electronically. But if you participate, even 1 minute in person, and then leave and participate electronically, you still get meeting pay.
I think.
Because it's too hard to measure otherwise.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking if you're a voting member and you're making up the quorum and you're coming in electronically, you probably should get
You should be,
paid.
get you. yeah, why-
Otherwise, you shouldn't.
Yeah,
If you're required to be part of
why
the
show,
quorum.
show the prejudice there?
Mhm.
Because
So,
if you're gonna do it, you wanna be consistent.
Does that make sense, Joel? So if you're,
Mm.
if you're part of the quorum and you're a voting member, I think you should get, and you're coming in electronically,
Mm.
so that meeting can progress because you're part of the quorum, then I think you should get paid.
But,
But if you're not,
uh,
then,
like yesterday, there were 13 board members.
Right.
And so, Scott Nielsen was he came in, and then he was still participating electronically, but he was like the 10th or 11th member. So he wasn't necessary, but he was still participating. I would say he gets meeting pay.
he's still part of the quorum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Whether there's 8 or 15, you're still part of the quorum.
okay.
I
Is that
think-
kosher to you?
Yeah, that's fine. The only consideration is that I might have misunderstood when you said if they are necessary for the quorum, then they get paid. If they're not necessary, but they're just extra, that they don't get paid. I think that becomes problematic because we had people who were dropped in and dropped out yesterday. And we had some that were necessary for the vote. And then there were some that
I
weren't
think that gets
necessary,
too
but they only,
complicated.
it does,
Yeah.
it becomes way too
You're
complicated.
either in or out.
They're either in or out, yeah. I
Yeah,
think that's
so
much
if you
cleaner.
participate in part of the meeting in person, well, how about if you get there and sign your name? And then even if you aren't there for the full meeting, but if you signed your name in person, you get the meeting pay.
Sometimes they don't sign, they don't have anything for you to sign.
And the way this is,
That's the way the legislature does it, from my understanding, when I researched
Mm-hmm.
this, is that the legislature has electronic, they have the requirement that you don't get paid unless you're there. But many of them will show up only for enough time just to sign the document so that they can get paid, and then they leave and participate electronically. So I think that would be consistent with what the legislature is saying.
And we have a similar control in that's the form that you would fill out, that Lorraine provides to
Okay,
you.
and
So,
that's-
so we would review those and, you know.
I was gonna say, but.
We have a control.
Yeah, say I go to the Utah Rural Schools Association, they're not gonna have a form there for me
No.
to sign, because it's their
Right.
meeting, it's
Yeah.
not our meeting, right?
But you.
I would have to come back and sign
you
a
will.
form.
Right,
Sure.
And there's an electronic form that's in it.
yes.
Where this is going, there will be a paper form or an electronic form requiring either a paper signature or electronic signature, and you will personally declare what meeting you went to, date, location, etc. And Lorraine isn't gonna hold our hand and try to chase all of this down. We will, if we wanna be reimbursed, then we will make that request and sign that request. So those are some new changes, just passing things around, and that is probably gonna change. Because board members will make their own declaration of the meeting. Whether they attended electronically or physically, that declaration will be made in simple form. So I think we can, I think we're good on making the reimbursement happen.
It's just deciding.
If
what
it qualifies.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the qualifying part right now, what
Yes, sir.
qualifies the reimbursement.
Okay, so I think on electronic, we've reached resolution. I would like it on the form that we sign, maybe add language saying if you attended the meeting exclusively electronically or via telephone, you do not receive meeting pay. Just that kind of gentle reminder,
Let
right
me
there on
ask-
the form when you're
Let me
signing
ask
it.
a question here, okay?
Mhm.
And this is, sorry, throwing the wrench into the works again here. So, I'm on the Utah Rural Schools Association Board of Trustees, and they've told me, because they have their meetings far away, right? They said, we'd love for you to come in electronically, just because it's so far. Okay, I will probably get in my car and drive down there, because that's, you know, I have the ability to do that and the time to do that. But I'm wondering if that is, you know, if I'm there electronically.
That's too of much of an outlier, Board Member Hanson.
But
I think
that's
we
what
don't
I'm
make
saying,
it.
we're
Keep it
gonna
as
have- but we're
appointed.
gonna
No,
have
I'm
outliers.
keeping it simple, like Chair.
Chair.
Like I'll be working with Lorraine, and there'll be some QA/QC and on the reimbursements, but whether it's in Salt Lake or Blanding, this is a simple yes, no eligible. And if it's eligible, you submit on your form. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Right, but we're talking about electronic.
Okay, but I'm just saying, okay, now let's talk the
Yeah.
electronic side. Whether you're there in person or electronically, where we're going on with, whatever we're doing with the board, we ought to be treating everybody the same. Correct? And so you're.
So are you guys in agreement there that electronic? But because I think Joel said you've gotta show up and sign something.
Well, you either show up and sign something, or you sign something afterwards attesting that you attended
Okay.
in person.
Which would be the form.
Which would
Yeah.
be the
Yeah.
form.
Which can be electronic.
We're gonna go try to get a copy of the form.
So that's
Yeah,
slightly
it's
unfair.
needing a little bit more work, but.
Yeah, it does.
That is slightly unfair of the Utah Rural Schools Association, but in interest of having one clean policy electronically, that's what we're doing. If you drive to it, though, you get paid for the travel and being there in person.
Right.
But if you participate electronically, you won't.
The other part of the conversation that you opened, I thought, was do you get full pay, a full stipend or partial, and on the stipend side of it. And we don't have anything in board rule that addresses a partial stipend. And when you're looking at the equity piece of what it takes for a meeting and et cetera, as low as this number is, are you sure you know, there was talk of splitting it or doing a half if? And that's gonna create another level of significant challenge on what creates the half. Is it time in a meeting, or there are these different thresholds that's gonna make it pretty tough. Like the legislature is a different world. Their compensation's quite a bit more generous than on this. So that's something that needs to also be determined before we pick these.
All right. Okay, so we've resolved the electronic issue.
Okay, tell me how
And
you,
Board
tell
Member
me your
Hanson
thoughts.
pointed out how it's not perfectly fair. On electronic, if you attend the meeting only electronically, with no part in person, you don't get reimbursed, you don't get meeting pay, you don't get travel pay. That's,
Is that your understanding too, Mark?
Well, it's not.
Because I
If
thought we
that's
were
what you
saying.
want, If that's what you want, to move forward to the board, it hasn't been
Yeah,
defined in
that's,
statute.
I was gonna say, that's not what I thought we were agreeing to. I
No, I
thought
thought it was,
that you were
you're
gonna
be
get paid as
consistent.
long as you signed something saying you were there. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
well, that's the same thing. We're still on the same page. Like, if you attend a meeting only by phone or electronically, you don't get meeting or travel pay. If you attend any portion of it, you'll either sign something at that meeting, or you'll sign the form afterwards.
But you have to be there in person, is what you're saying.
You have to be there in person to get meeting pay. Your physical presence.
I just, Chair,
Mhm.
now, you guys know where I stand on the whole compensation thing, but I put myself in other board members' shoes, and there's gonna be a time, and there is a time where electronic is preferred. But you're still punching a clock, you're still preparing, you're still putting your time in during that electronic meeting and participating, representing the board. So by drawing that hard line, you're actually discouraging some people. You're showing a prejudice towards the physical meeting, whether you're there 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever. And I think that's gonna bite you in the long run.
So I think
We'll
that.
be back in here talking again.
I think the intent of this conversation was to clarify which committees you were getting paid for, because I started this conversation, unfortunately,
Yeah.
at some points. But I think that no one has complained about being paid or not being paid, but there just wasn't a clear understanding of what you were getting paid for. I think if we make a, I'm sorry, I think if you make a, if we make a decision, we still can go back and revise it. Currently, no one's complaining that they're not getting paid enough, and like, I just didn't know what I was getting paid for. I was confused. So I just wanted to know which ones. So I think when we have to cross that bridge, then we can determine that people are participating more electronically than personally. People are feeling that they need to be paid for their time electronically, but I don't think we're at that point yet. And it's, you know, all these things are living documents that we can work on. So I think that if we make some decisions and we need to go back and revise them, that would be okay. But currently, I don't think we are at that point just yet about being.
Dave?
No, I was just gonna suggest one additional piece we could add to the policy, and that is that if you decide that electronic, you're not gonna get paid and you have to be physically there, you can always create the exception, which is that by vote of the board, a particular meeting, for example, if you want to send each one of the board members to the four corners of Utah and then participate all electronically to demonstrate the robust nature of such a meeting, you can always say that you're compensated for that kind of participation, which would be counter to what what the general rule is. So the board can also create an exception within itself for the purposes of a unique meeting.
That's an exciting board meeting. We should do that.
I just,
What-
my concern is
What about this?
also for those board members who don't live around Salt Lake. I mean, we all do, and we can get to most meetings. But those who don't, will they be able to participate if they can't participate electronically? Like Michelle, can Michelle participate,
I agree.
And so I'm wondering if that's
I appreciate
fair.
that.
I just don't.
How about this? What if-
Maybe it's not fair, especially if we can come in electronically to our meetings and get compensated.
Well, if it's, we have the same policy, you have to be there, but if it's more, the meeting is more than 50 miles away from your
I
home,
was gonna say the same thing.
then you can get meeting pay for participating electronically.
Because that's our rule for overnight compensation.
Yeah, that-
The
I
same,
think that'd be
that's,
consistent.
yeah, then that's not even the same as it is for overnight compensation.
Mhm.
Because I don't want two different
Yeah.
rubrics.
Mhm.
Good. Deputy and then Dave.
I think that's great.
Mhm.
Here's what's great about this is, and we'll apply the design thinking. These are, what you'll be doing is just iterations, and your staff will support the analysis of whether it's working, the budget is, so let's try it. Let's just try it, there's nothing wrong with trying it. We'll hold that standard, we'll do the 50 miles, you know, and then, when you fill out the form, we can put a question on there, you know, was this particular meeting that you participated in electronically 50 miles further from your home? Was the physical site of the meeting, something like that? We'll do that. And let's just do the iterations and come back, and this is great.
Yeah.
That's good, thanks,
Okay.
Joe.
So I'm gonna repeat it, and I hope it's really simple. So electronic meetings, you get no meeting pay, you get no travel. But if it's over 50 miles, then you can get meeting pay. And if you do both, meaning you attend in person and a portion electronic, then you still get meeting and travel pay.
That's
Let's try it.
Good. Okay, that is resolved.
Do we need to vote on it?
Probably have a global something maybe here at the end. Or maybe we should just do that now, because you're right. Okay, so my motion is that on electronic attendance at meetings, our policy is as follows. If you participate in a meeting only electronically, you get no meeting and no travel pay. Unless, if it's over 50 miles, or consistent with our overnight policy, and you participate electronically, then you can get meeting pay. And if you do both, meaning you attend in person and then a portion of the meeting electronically, you still get meeting and travel pay.
Got it.
Good. I so move.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous, thank you. Okay, we made some progress today. Anyone who says we don't make progress around here, they're wrong. Okay, now we're moving on, are we gonna go through each one of these individually? Commission on Civic and Character Education, starting with that?
Yeah, we can't get compensated for that.
Oh, those ones have already been determined, so we're just gonna start
Okay.
with the blank box.
We're starting with
It's
the
really the
underage
blank
drinking.
ones we need your
Yeah.
help with.
Okay,
If we can focus on those.
so Utah Underage Drinking Prevention Program Advisory Council, do we have anyone on that right now?
Me,
And who else?
I think it's Jenny.
Okay, so.
Doesn't
what-
matter. We don't like you, we're not paying.
Doesn't matter who's on it, we have two members.
Okay, and why shouldn't they? I start with the presumption, innocent until proven guilty. Why shouldn't they get meeting and travel pay for this?
Well, we kind of determined that if you're appointed or we've created the task force, you should get paid. If you're invited, you should not. But we're going to revisit the invited ones.
With that methodology, so.
Yeah. So with that methodology, would you say yes for the underage drinking because you're appointed?
Yes,
just
I
start
would
with yes.
accept, yes.
State Charter School Board, you're invited, but you're appointed also?
The board is invited,
But
but
the
the
chairs-
members are, the chair appoints who's gonna be on it. So it's an assignment
That
from the
would be-
board.
That would be a yes under the appointed. It happens to say invited here, but you're appointed.
Mhm. And then would that be the same thing with the UHSAA handbook?
HSAA
Board of
Board of
Trustees?
Trustees.
Are you appointing somebody or just invited?
On the
Next one?
high school,
Yeah.
you're appointed.
Rural schools, you're appointed. Board
I'm
of
keeping it
Directors?
simple.
You're invited, but you're appointed also, and you're non-voting member. Is that a yes or a no?
If you're
Mark
appointed,
Mark appoints somebody to be on.
if you're
the-
appointed, yes.
I agree. Now, NASB, I think that's more complicated because that's out of state, isn't it?
Mhm.
And so we're looking at substantially greater cost for NASB than we are for the other previous ones. Can someone make the case for NASB? I haven't been to any of their events.
I
You're-
am
You're
that.
you're reimbursed on all your travel
Yep.
and per diem. It's about, if you're there in the meeting, and you're appointed,
That's already a yes.
then that's a yes. It's-
Mhm.
I'm not looking at the entity, I'm looking at, are they appointed or not appointed? Trying to keep it simple.
Well, these are already yeses because we already.
I
yeah,
agree.
Yeah, so they're already yeses.
All right, so NASB's are both yeses. Next page. Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee. Anyone want to make a case for that, yes or no?
What is that currently?
How these worked is, when we did the resolutions for these advisory committees, we asked staff if they'd like to have board members on them or not. And the ones that did, we put that into the resolution, and then those board members are appointed, and the ones that didn't, we left them off. So we've got, probably 6 or 7 advisory committees, and then these are the ones that asked to have a board member appointed to the committee.
Oh,
Next
sorry.
Just some
All of them
background,
have been
so you
yes so far.
understand.
Yes.
No. So, an Assessment and Accountability Policy Advisory Committee, are we,
Do you appoint someone for that, Mark?
I believe that they are appointed. And I have to get my sheet out to see who's there.
So that's a yes?
yes?
Yes.
The next one, Student Data Policy Advisory Group,
Appointed by the board?
That's their appointment.
definitely a yes.
The Teacher of the Year Selection Committee, we were just asking for volunteers, and I
Mhm.
don't know if we're appointing someone. But
That's-
I remember every year I've been on the board, it's just like, who wants to be on that?
Mhm.
And it was just asking for volunteers, so I don't know.
That's a no.
They want a member, they
Mhm.
don't want the whole board there. And they ask us to, this is where it gets tricky, is I end up appointing somebody. So as long as I'm appointing, it
Mhm.
meets that test, so that would be a yes.
Okay. Now, moving on to ad hoc committee assignments.
And these are all created by the board, except for the Utah School Safety Commission.
And the Early College Coursework
Okay.
Policy Committee.
Mhm.
Are there any, under ad hoc committee assignment, that, I think this is a better question, that anyone thinks should not be? Because I think we're gonna agree that they should all be compensated.
Did you appoint all of these positions, Mark?
Yes.
So then they should be. Right.
Yeah,
Well, the only thing I know where somebody's appointed, the only one I know of, unless I'm missing the boat here, where they cannot get compensation is STEM, if I got that right.
And the commission that I'm on with the Lieutenant Governor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
the statute prohibits it.
Yes.
Okay.
So any appointed unless, so I'm gonna, as we're moving forward, if this rather board wants things going forward, unless they'll be compensated unless statute prohibits it. So we'll have to make sure the board members know when they're accepting the appointment that
Yeah.
statute prohibits it.
Mhm.
And we need to ask Angie, because remember that, I think that was a motion we made last time, that Spencer brought up, that he thinks this was just oversight.
Mhm.
When they changed our compensation and tied it to theirs, they didn't look at each individual committee and say, oh, wait, we need to change that so they can get compensated. So we need to talk to Angie and have her put it on our list of things that we want the legislature to take a look at for us and see if we can change those so that we can get compensated. I did, the last commission meeting I went to, I brought it up with Tammy Piper, and she said they don't have a problem with it, so, with compensation for that committee. So, and she agreed with me that it's probably something that was just an oversight.
Deputy?
So for now, we'll say yes, okay, to both, if that's okay, and then we'll get that clarification. I just want to make sure that's in the record, and Pat can put and capture that, and we'll try the iterations, and we'll follow up with Angie, you know, getting the code change or however we do, okay? I just want to be clear.
And I'm not sure if it will simplify everything moving forward, but if we had something in our rule that said if they're appointed, they get compensated unless, then we're not keeping a spreadsheet as things evolve and as things come off the board, go on the board. I mean, I'm not talking about board, sorry. Onto the spreadsheet, off of the spreadsheet. If we had something simple, our methodology is simple, it'd make our lives easier and this would be less time consuming. If that's the intent.
Completely agree. Dave?
One thing that I would suggest is, as these things come up at the board, if, and Lorraine, I'll try to cue her into this, is that if this is part of the motion, and in other words, this is part of the, you know, we're formulating the, you know, like when we did the school fees task force, and it would fall within the compensation direction. If we just do that as a clip, this grid will be really easy to amend and to keep up. It's if we have to go backwards and try to figure it out, then it becomes a little bit of a mess. But as these things come up, or as appointments are made, if we make that as a part of the kind of addend the motion to include this the idea of compensation, it'll be easier to keep track of.
Mark? We're moving forward on that task force right now, and if I remember right, we did not say anything about compensation, and I think moving forward, I think that will burden us over time to remember or recall on the compensation side, and I think it'd be easy to get away and go, oh, what did we, now we gotta bring this back in a public meeting after the wheels are turning.
The reason for that is it's on this list, is why we didn't do it. But you're absolutely right, but at the time they were saying, we're moving to create the task force, and it will be one that will fall within the compensation commission.
We'll just have to always remember to say what is and.
See, I kind of have a problem because with all these invited ones, we all volunteered to do lots of these. You just chose who you wanted to appoint. So, I mean, that could be, you know, I mean, you could say this is an unpaid position and you're all invited to apply who would like to do it. And if no one applies, then you can appoint somebody. But if you're just choosing from a list of invitees.
Well, there's things that happen inside this building where they'll say, you know what, you know, I want Joe Wright to come in as we're doing this. I think I would like, and so they invite him in. As they're not to make a selection, but comment as they're trying to work on something or whatever. I'm interested in his point of view, or this is something that's hot that's happening in his area, and let's just say it's a committee, this meeting. Or he invites himself, but doesn't participate. I don't, that's an invitation, and I don't expect to see a compensation thing going across learning staff. But there's a lot of invitations to little things that you can say yes or no to, and it happens all through every month. So I like where you're going on the invitation side.
Because I think there was kind of a lot of people wanted to be on the rural schools. I was interested in that, and I'm interested in everything. But I mean, I think that we could kind of whittle down by saying, I mean, as a board member, I want to participate in stuff. So I don't feel the need to be compensated for everything. I just was confused about which things we were compensated and which we were not. When I see these invited, and then it turns out that we all listed where we wanted to go, and then you appointed us, I think that kind of creates more expense than we need to create for ourselves. As I'm looking at this to be something that's now yes to everything.
I think it's, as we look at the budget next year,
Mhm.
if it starts going too
Okay.
quickly, that's the first thing that can be cut. Like, I got invited to Beverly Taylor Sorensen Art Gala in my capacity as state school board.
No, that's definitely not paid for, but these ones right
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
are definitely paid for.
Okay.
But the things that we're invited to,
No,
you
would-
know, because we're on the state school board, that are more kind of, you know, ceremonial.
No, you definitely wouldn't get paid for that in this parameters at all, but this one right
Mhm.
here, charter school, you're invited and then you're appointed by the list of people who.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
If you're invited by the chair, it's very different than just being invited by
Okay.
the fancy invitation in your mailbox.
I think it's a difference between mentally, if I'm appointed,
Mhm.
I feel like I have a responsibility to be
Mhm.
there. If I'm invited, that's
Mhm.
more optional,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
well, I'm looking at these kind of formal invitations on this list here. I'm not looking at every invitation that comes in my mailbox. I'm kind of just talking about these official capacity invitations.
Sure.
Any deputy?
And that's, what we'd like is, or what the staff recommends, is this be the foundation basically for any board member to refer to,
Mhm.
to say, oh, okay.
Yep.
It's this committee, so yes, and then
Mhm.
they would know to fill the form out.
Mhm.
So if it's not on here, then, you know, the implication is that, you know, if it's an invitation and all that too, then. And we can add, or, you know,
Mhm.
as we progress together, we just want to start iterations and we'll
Mhm.
track the budget and we'll do all those great things you're talking about here.
Yeah, I think we're ready for a motion, but I'll
Well,
let.
no, I was gonna say, and maybe you just change the language of it, rather than saying you've been invited to, you know, the board will invite you to be on this, and then, you know, get the list, and you appoint somebody from that.
Mhm.
Versus an invitation where you're just being invited by a
Mhm.
committee or something else. But that is a more formal, that invitation is really, not truly an invitation.
Yeah.
What it is it's in that other sense. And so
Mhm.
maybe we just change the language of that so that it keeps it clean, so that invitation doesn't become, doesn't appear in two different places.
So, well, to me, when I look at these ones that say they're invited, those actually take place usually not during the school day and after hours. So when I'm invited to be part of the rural schools, I've been to a few of them, and they're after hours, and you can kind of make it there after work. So that's why when you're invited, I'm thinking that it's not taking away from my work day, and I'm invited to come to see it. Does the school charter board meet after hours? They meet during, okay. So that was my misconception about some of these. When you're invited, it's after school, after work hours, after, so that's why I was like, maybe it's not as weighty as some of the other ones. That was my thought process, but I'm wrong, so move past that.
Okay, I'm ready for a motion,
Do you want me to do, I'm happy to.
please.
I move that we approve board policy, the amendment to board policy 2001 as amended. Wait, 2001 attachment, that's what I need to say. I move that we approve the board policy 2001 attachment 1 as amended.
And I think, as we just discussed, for compensation for each of those line items, right?
Right, that's
Okay.
our amendments, right?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I think we're gonna try and do 1.4, and then we'll have a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
Deputy,
Chair,
you wanna move something else
Jared
around?
just walked out, so he's supposed to be up here.
Okay.
Actually, just stay there for a second. will you?
Please.
So we'll start with we'll start with the facility improvements. Can you pull the backup up? So in your backup, yeah, just move that a little bit. So we have the capital improvements. Why we're doing this with you here is because we need some decisions made. If I could go to the screen, Chair, and point some items out. Construction costs have skyrocketed within the last few months. So here, the board had approved us, and funding for the parking lot security arms, right? The bid that's coming in though,
Wow.
here, and it shot up another, roughly $70,000, okay? So if you'll scroll down, Jamie, please. So then we have this one here with the security camera upgrade. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to interface, so badging wise, so I have a badge here, right? That gets me into the building. We'd like to uniformly have one badge that gets you into the security arms or the gates, and then also get you into the building. So when we, back when we did the bids, right, we got the bids in, but now, because of all the construction that's happening in Florida and Houston and all that, materials are very hard to get. Plus, it's that time of the year, right? The weather's better, and so we're competing against that. What we need to do is we need your guidance on which is more important. So scroll back up, Jamie, please. See how we have the parking lot security arms and then the security cameras? What we'd like to do is, because we were using this year's funding, or well, it's your unrestricted, your board's unrestricted carry forward money that we're using to do these improvements with, we would like you to make a motion to allow your staff to forgo doing the parking lot arms and the security camera until later in the summer or fall, and using, we can carry, these are unrestricted balances, so we can carry forward them, but we may have to come back to you because for more money, when we determine your unrestricted carry forward from closure processes that are occurring right now to meet these increased costs because of what's going on in the economy right now. Does that make sense? Because we're following your procedural pieces in that you were saying, hey, get these done using, the funds within, and get this done before June 30th. It's just not gonna happen. So we need to advise you that the bids have gone, that the construction costs have gone up, and staff feel that if we defer this to later in the summer or early fall, that we can get it down to, I mean, it's a risk, we're taking a little risk here, but we do feel that, paying all this amount here would require above additional funding that we just really don't have, especially since because what we're doing here is we're talking to you about the IT infrastructure, and we're telling you about, these competing demands that are going on. And meanwhile, costs have skyrocketed too, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
On that? Because this is what we need the finance committee for. We need you to guide the staff and then inform the whole board that execution of these funds will occur later than we anticipated, because we feel that by doing that, the cost might come down, the timing would be better, and we're a little more frugal to the public on
So to be
what we're trying to
clear,
accomplish.
the security arms and the doors would both be on the same program
Yes.
when we did this?
No.
Oh,
Okay, so when we
That's
did
what I
this, they were
assumed.
separate, and
Okay.
so what
Okay.
you just said is what we're asking you for.
Okay.
Is to allow us to delay
Mhm.
these two particular projects so that we can combine them and potentially get lower costs if we wait a little bit longer past the high peak summer months and when construction costs might come down, because we can get construction people here to do it, but we will pay exorbitantly for them, because what they're doing is they're saying, well, yeah, if you pay me more than this project
Yeah.
over here, of course I'll be there,
Oh.
right? And that's where we're seeing, and we believe that by combining with the building access here, it's more conducive to efficiency, right? So I don't have to pull a badge out and do the parking arm, and then I have to go
Get enough
through and do all the security, because there's, all these other parts are moving parts too. For example, the reception remodel, where we're moving the desks to the south end, and this goes to your questions of me about egress and how the boardroom next year was shaped. We just want to be very transparent, first of all to you, but then to the public as well, that we feel the juice is worth the squeeze in delaying these two so that we can combine them and potentially not have to pay as much if we wait out the high peak summer months. Does that make sense?
Board Member Hanson?
So Scott, question that I have is,
Sure.
I would suspect that during the summer months, though, that it would be less disruptive. Is that not right?
That's true, because you're not meeting in July, you know, and that's.
And not just to us, but to the other staff too, because school's not in session for most, and so
That
they
is-
probably
that is a
take
great-
more time
yes.
off, and so it would be
Yep,
less
that
disruptive.
is a great consideration as well. So we just want to make sure that we're tracking this, that we're advising you accordingly, that the costs have skyrocketed, that we feel it's more efficient if we combine both, you know, in one project, but that'll take a little bit more time. But you're absolutely right, summer is the best time to do it. So if you want to stay on target and you want to stay on track, then then I would need a motion to make up the difference here out of that 230. So you still have carried forward dollars. Remember yesterday we did the discretionary funds? We could cover this. That's not, the money's really not the problem. We're just trying to be frugal, we're trying to be precise, we're trying to be efficient. But that is a great consideration is, you know, do we, you know, forego it and then impact, you know, the start of the school year, fall time frame, too. That's a
think
great
having a
consideration.
better system later is better than doing it now. I'd rather have the one system that has one badge and do it right instead of having two systems in place. So,
Chair Huntsman?
I think there's a couple challenges. I appreciate where your proposal's going, but in the transportation world, everything that you're talking about, the security arm, all of that stuff, right now for budgeting purposes, for entrance way, you're around $150,000 to $180,000 each
Yes, sir.
for budgeting. And all of those components of this inflation factor that's hitting, there's a huge demand with a lot of capital improvement. You're not, we can risk and see what happens this fall, but I'm here to say, in the outside world of this, and you could certainly talk with DFCM and they could give you some plans on it, but I don't think you're gonna see it come down.
Okay.
Number one. Number two is, the implementation of putting these in, the severe inconvenience when you're taking out a section of your parking to put these little facilities in. There's some traffic planning. I'm not sure if your facility people are doing that.
Yes.
As part of this, but the best time to put it in is your slowest month of activity, which is still this summer.
mhm.
And so I appreciate being conservative and rolling the dice a little bit, but I don't think you're gonna save anything, and if you do, you're gonna put it in during your peak times periods here, and if it's winter, then it's complicated by weather and a few other things that actually drive costs up. So I'm not contradicting, I don't want to.
No, it's a discussion.
I'm just
sir.
saying this is
You're not
what's
contradicting.
happening in the
No, I just-
budgeting
This
world.
is what we need. We need this discussion and your guidance and the committee's guidance. Because if we stay on track, if we stay on schedule to do the parking arms, because we could combine still in the summer, we're just saying that back when we did the bid, it was here, but now we're upwards of here. So Deborah, there's 200 and some thousand still left, right, of their discretionary funds for this. About 240, after we briefed you yesterday that, you know, we have the facilitator, which was only 30, and then another 20, I think it was, for, what was the 20 for? I can't remember
Not,
either.
the
But basically,
boardroom tables.
basically what we would need is for the committee to say, no, stay on track, keep the projects going, but we would like you to make a motion so that the board would approve us taking another $100,000. I mean, I know this is roughly 70, but then, you know, if we want to combine with the building access here, then I need actually 70 plus 95 would be what, 165 of the 200 that you have left, because of we didn't, you know, it's just the timing. We got the bid, but now DFCM and the construction, the project people that they would pick to do that are saying, no, it's gonna cost you more from what we put back here. to combine both and stay on target. And they're all recommending that you wait, but you're right, Sir Chair, that, you know, it's a gamble, it's a risk. But we just wanted to make sure you were aware that the costs have increased and that we would need more money for the construction aspects of that. But there is funding available, that we'd respectfully request that the Finance Committee make a motion so that in the June meeting, the board would approve using that money for these purposes of combining on the current schedule.
I'd like them to be combined.
Yeah.
That's my priority as well. So I would like, can I make that motion?
You can say so moved,
So moved. So moved what he just said.
Okay.
which is to combine. yeah.
So
To combine.
this motion is just to combine, we still haven't decided the date on which it will.
No, we are deciding the date as well.
All you do is, as part of the motion, you say, staff, you will stay on the construction schedule. We've been advised that the costs have gone considerably up, but we feel that the summer months are more conducive to, you know, because especially you're not meeting in July,
Yeah.
school's not in session. I mean, there is year-round
Yeah.
school to consider that starts in
Yeah.
July too, but, okay, sir? I mean, that's.
Okay.
So staying on track and we're combining it with the building access.
And the funds would come.
And the funds are going to increase. We are aware that the funds are increasing. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So moved.
all in favor?
Aye.
Passes, thank you.
80 left. We're gonna
Before
spend-
before we go into our break,
We still have to cover the IT infrastructure
Ah,
piece
okay.
of this agenda item, if that's okay.
All right.
It wouldn't take too long. Jared, will you please?
Jared's coming up.
Okay.
Deputy Jones, I was alarmed, maybe I'm ignorant, but I saw what I would consider a homeless camp, just north of our,
Yes.
building.
Yes.
What in the world, I mean, does Salt Lake City
So-
allow this? I mean,
Well, so what we do is we call the Salt Lake City PD to move the, what we're experiencing is a migration of the population because of the clearing of Rio Grande.
Mhm.
And so it's, yeah, so where you saw that is the library, and I think the museum and the.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. So they come through and they do clear these
Mhm.
areas. The timing of it though is also dependent on what other, law enforcement activities are taking at a particular time. But I've
Mhm.
witnessed SLCPD come through and clear people off of that north side of our
Right.
building.
So it's legal for those folks to stay there,
Well.
how long? Like 6 hours, 12 hours, 48 hours?
I'd have to I could come back and check on that. I'm not sure what the law is as far as how long they can stay there. What we do experience is that typically they'll come through and clear them, and then I've been here at about 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, they'll move back in, stay, you know, and sometimes they do come and clear them at night as well.
Okay, well, I find this unacceptable for the safety and well-being of our employees here.
Right.
I would like to put it on the agenda next week and have a letter that the state school board sends to the powers that be at Salt Lake City saying, this is not acceptable.
Okay, we'll draft the letter, and
Uh-huh.
I'll bring it back to you, okay?
Yeah,
Will that work?
we
Yeah,
need
I
better
know how to-
police presence. We
Yeah.
employ
Kevin.
hundreds of people here
That's right.
and are a great citizen here and
Joel?
Sure.
Let me just throw something, I think,
Uh-huh.
I think the city would really be concerned about what's happening on our property and not on what's happening in the community as much. And those entities that over there, I know this for a fact, are very concerned. But those homeless people have rights too. When they move in, they know that's a public turf, they kind of work the system because they know the system.
They're
They get
desperate.
pushed out, and they know they can safely come back onto that public property. I don't think a letter, you know, you make the request, and it can come back next time, but I don't think it's gonna get us any mileage at all, because they are really good at sweeping this place every time we call our property. And so they react, but the problem, their problem there is moving them to the places where they would feel comfortable, but they're free to move. And you talk to law enforcement, and they know their rights. They have rights just like you and I.
And they don't have any options.
I
And
just
so
think our
the letter's
ability.
I don't think the letter, anything to do with safety on our safety on our property is what if we're gonna put something in the letter, we need to address, Chair.
At some point, our ability to recruit and retain employees is gonna be materially harmed if we have a homeless camp over there. I guess I'm just really unimpressed that Salt Lake City's tolerating this.
Well, I have a solution, Chair.
Please.
Let's move this building down to Fillmore.
I second. I mean, if Salt Lake City wants to have,
I
you
know,
know,
this is a Salt Lake. yeah,
further
this is a Salt Lake
evacuation of
City problem,
businesses,
yeah.
it makes a lot more sense to go down to where the prison's being taken out. That's a much more central location.
I don't think
For
this is a
safety.
choice that Salt Lake City's making. I think it's something that's being thrust upon them, and I don't think the people that are homeless are making this choice all the time either. So it's a very sad situation.
I
for
don't
these
represent the
people.
homeless people. I represent my district and I represent the employees here.
We do actually represent the homeless people, because we have a large percentage of our homeless people in our public schools. So you have to be cognizant of that as well.
It's,
Homeless people do not actively make a choice to be homeless all the time.
it's on the agenda next month to
Okay.
talk about
Okay,
it
we'll
more.
bring it up.
Okay.
So we did make this agenda item an action item specific to what you just did, the motion you just made as it relates to the construction or capital improvements that we're doing. This particular part of this agenda item, though, is more for informational purposes, because yesterday, as you all know, the board made a motion to approve the base budgets with the reallocation of unrestricted state funding going towards two sections, information technology, which was 500,000, and then SAS, which was 200,000, right? So this particular piece is an information piece to you on the way ahead of where we were, or where we are, what is right now, and then the question in design thinking of what if, that Jared's just gonna present to you for information purposes, so that you know that the funding that you approved yesterday, or that the board approved yesterday, is going towards further improvements and all that too. What else did I miss?
Well, so the 500,000, just to be clear, and that's what I
Yeah.
brought up yesterday, was for
For
staff.
staff, yes.
Increases, so it's not part of the infrastructure part, but it's to
No.
stabilize us with.
Right, because there's three objectives that Jared has as part of his performance, is systems, manpower, and security. And you also already know about the security piece, too, by way of the UEN briefing you received last month. This is just to make sure that we're continually advising you on the improvements that are being made, where we're at and all that. So if we could just kick it over to Jared, you probably only need 5 minutes, maybe
Yeah.
more, and then we can go on the break that you need, sir. So-
Yeah, part of what I'm doing here is marketing. I mean, it is throughout the agency, as we talked about before, is making IT a kind of a core competency. And so is what we're trying to do is, we talked about the IT governance body, and so I've spoken with the deputy superintendent, Scott Jones, and the superintendent, and we're putting in place an IT governance body, which I talked about before. A lot of the problem that we're seeing right now is a lot of unplanned work that's coming down to us, like I talked about with silos and everybody procuring their own software solutions. And so that's one of the first things we had to control is all of that work coming down to us, because it was unsustainable. We had a lot of technical debt. Our infrastructure cannot support all of the systems that we currently have, let alone any new development. So, so I appreciate the board approving the 500,000 yesterday. That will help kind of stop the bleeding with our current staff, and then we're looking at contractors. We are bringing in contractors to work on some of the solutions that, or the activities that we already had in place before I even got here. So we're not building a large pool of staff, and then when the work goes away, we don't know what to do. So we are utilizing contractors in that space as well. So that's what I've got right now. We are doing a lot of, we're putting in a framework in place down, so there's a lot of behind the scenes things as far as policies and processes that have not been there, like software development lifecycle, stuff that will help, help us be more efficient, so.
Next slide, please. One of the things that we're promoting too, along with Jared is briefed to you, and that we're clarifying, is that whenever we're asking, whether it be the legislature into house, or whether it's true costs of implementation, we feel like going into the next session, I need to do a better job of communicating with legislators or the legislative fiscal analysts that, hey, if there's an idea for you know, a particular software program that's vendor provided or that we'd internally program, that we have to do a better job as part of the fiscal note process in, you know, constructing, beyond the initial implementation costs of the software, what it's going to take to maintain or sustain that software, and what the impacts are on our educators and LEAs on that too. So, you know, it's a challenge though, because the fiscal note process is really quick turnaround times and all that. And it's very challenging for Jared to say, well, you know, if we program this, it's gonna cost in the out years within, say, a 36 to 48 hour period. I mean, Jamie can attest to how quickly 24 hours, how quickly we respond to the LFA. So we're gonna work this a little bit harder this year, and do some iteration studies and all that as well on, are we accurately doing the real cost of software ownership or system or application ownership in the future. Next slide, please. And then, you know, Jared already spoke to the IT governance part of this, so that we have a technology planning committee to where instead of this, right, we're building an infrastructure that is interoperable, you know, as far as, you look at a city like Salt Lake, and they've designed tracks and doing different things like that to get, you know, people from point A to point B in a more efficient and proper manner. Even though the traffic signals that are constructed or different parts like that is all part of the future here, especially with our IT governance and IT infrastructure. So I just wanted to add on that.
So I will add that we are coming forth with an overall strategy, but there, we're looking at it in two phases. There's the sustainment part, fixing what we have now and maintaining it while we innovate and get up to speed with where we want to go. So anyway.
I appreciate this tremendously, because I understand that we have not dedicated resources to the last slide at all, that we have just kind of assumed that all these things, well, I'm trying not to be inflammatory, but I think there has been a lack of that, and I think we need to honor that more. In the next slide, I don't know why those people have books on their head, but.
That's my hair.
Hey, these are my drawings.
That's my wig.
I love them.
That's you on the left there.
Why did you put a book on her head?
That is me on the left. That's also me with my.
Actually, that's Scott trying to
my
put a
transplant.
book on his head.
Yeah, because the glare in this meeting was too harsh. So.
And you need to secretly embed a cow in every picture next time, okay?
And Natalie would love that. So, okay, so, sir, subject to any more questions or concerns about this concludes this agenda item. Although, Pat, will you please read the motion back, just so we're clear on the capital improvement motion? Can you read that back? Did you get that captured right? So basically, the motion is that in front of the full board next month, you know, they'll approve, or it's recommended that they approve the use of the remaining 195,000, didn't I say? Of the 165,000 of the 240,000 that's remaining in the discretionary funds.
Wait, didn't we just approve of 160 to the arms?
The
Now we're back to
remainder of
80.
the fund, because
Yeah.
you might not have the exact dollar.
Right, yeah. the remaining
Right?
fund for construction.
Didn't we just put construction money in there?
Okay, so sir, that concludes the agenda item, subject to any other
Okay.
questions or concerns.
So moved.
Thank you.
Do we make a motion on this?
I just made it.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you did you vote? You said aye, didn't you? You voted on the motion?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so we're good. No, we're good. You don't
Okay.
need-
All right.
yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
I
you,
just want to
Jared.
make sure she had it in the notes so that we can carry it.
Okay.
Okay. It is 42 after. Please be back by 8 till the hour.
8 till the hour?
Yes, ma'am.
It's 42 to, okay. Sorry, I did the math, I'm thinking 52. Like, that's not leaving.
So they don't want to go out here, do all that MAS system. Still labor there, Eric?
cross my eyelids open.
And I guess there was a question too on what is there, is it required to be?
Yeah, it's
There's
regular
requirements.
regulation or law. So there's.
Can we get phone coverage down here? Maybe if I get my window or something. You there? Hello?
Yeah, but when we talked before, it didn't sound like there was a need, it was just always what stated. We were just like requirement.
So my audit is in an effort to see what is out there and put it in the world.
And what's wrong with, and I'm just asking the question, what's wrong with maintaining what we have?
So did our employees go to?
Find out what the overall strategy is. That's not, that's just, you know, making, what's it, Adam,
So if a district has
maintain it, update it, and build it with the requirements that they need.
their collections go down,
We could do another year.
the need, everything,
My
they're estimated and set for rate
work.
for some reason.
The governance committee for their work, if they have responses to the adult RFPs, you would then have more information to make a decision about.
Yeah, right, no.
They want to go on a body.
So they try to glorify the performance every time. They hold a lot to the chest because they don't want to get too much information. They fear that it will provide public knowledge of what they can provide and at what cost. Then we come around back and go out. So what we can do is we can get this out, we could go ahead and launch the RFP. We'll put a clause in there that says, this may not be relevant. So vendors will apply, but there wouldn't be like, well, we're gonna award this on this day, we're just trying to get.
So they would talk to
And I think that's what we're. Right, and then that's why we let the RFP ride, because then we won't let's see what we get for decision-making purposes, but we're all under the understanding that it doesn't necessarily mean we will award.
So it would be necessary.
Is that an option?
That's
right, I wouldn't want to push it out in all the cases.
Have you?
But I think pushing
Because
it
we
out,
said
I think the
underestimated
clause
value.
says, Zach knows the language.
Right.
I'll circle back to Zach.
With this governance, it's not, we're not saying no, we're trying to have vision, visibility.
Have you talked to Bakerville yet about this? May?
Okay.
We have a contract with the average, so we have something there. That needs to be, everything. So I think that's, I'm just wondering, you know, we want to.
No, that's fine, if that's what, I thought, I saw it come through, and at the same time, we were talking about the governance.
We were anticipated.
I asked for some questions, who knows out there, how many people in Alberta?
I'm gonna have to go.
All of our stuff going on, because there are many things going on, and then you have conversations going on, right, I know. And then we have conversations going on about a state
Budget hearings now in June.
fire, so.
They say we're sitting at a rate that
I won't necessarily, because I think you're right. All right, you are right. There would be an information highway.
Give us,
Yeah.
give us better decisions.
Right. And we would know pricing better than.
Because the adult world is a small, I think higher up fiber six are provided across the.
Their basic levy is not really, the districts aren't really
That's who
basic
we're
levy necessarily, because as a state levy, that doesn't have that extent there.
And, and this is the,
Well, yeah.
Nevada had their own Golden area. They took that for under one. So Nevada, Kentucky, Montana, Hawaii.
By the way,
Well, sure.
Other states are all SIS and one.
well, we are doing K-16 or
KCC, yeah.
Well, I
Even-
understand that, but of course,
Yeah.
we have what you said, their property tax.
So anyway, with the SLPS system, all these different.
Right, they're more than.
But that's a good
thing.
thing.
Right.
So I'll get with Zach and see if we can do the language. I mean, you know,
Sure.
but it's clear that the wartime.
Sure.
Or never.
Right.
Well, you enjoy your cafe, okay?
Are we live? Yeah.
Well, those that get pensions. I think we have a rudimentary understanding of this. It's taken a while. We need it full time, more or less. Probably
Cat cards have, they look like a, chip in them and everything.
just so that they can do that.
I'm sure they should use the opportunity. As the cat cards. You have to buy computers with the cat for years, unless you buy this.
It'll be interesting to see what comes out of the nests. Stuff too.
Aaron?
You may have heard.
I said, how many days can I have until I can pick her brain to make sure I have everything I need?
You have till the 14th.
10 days.
We are working on transitioning all the responsibilities.
Who's gonna, are you hiring somebody new
Oh, I
to take
will.
her place? or
Well, we'll be
are
hiring
we
someone
moving?
else. Right now, we're collecting work. We're fortunate, we've got really good prospects. We believe, we have responsibility to trust on, so. But, right now. I'm not overly worried, because right now, that's not a hard task, the harder task is verifying numbers and making sure that comes out. Are you guys saying? Yes, verify. I'm just saying. So that's happening. And then we get Just so you know. Once in a while, we've got great escape days. Can I ask you questions since you're taking fantastic notes, right? I'm sure you are. It looks like 1.4 is passed, which, it's the facility improvement and IT infrastructure update.
Yes.
How did that go? Conversation?
Well, we are, so I just gave an update on the plans, which is, I think it's the $600,000 amount. And they talked about the facility updates to put in the arms, parking lot and security cameras. Scott suggested we wait until fall because the property prices might go down, insurance consultants and like that happen because of the nature of it. So I think the plan is to go ahead and do that during the summer when
Okay, so the action, there was no action with IT, like just there was an update.
it was just an update, yeah.
Good to know, because it says action, that's why I'm wondering.
Well, the action was on the facility, we really didn't have any action for that one.
Good to know. As you know, we're in other meetings too, going. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for doing this job.
So, I'm learning every day.
So there'll be two, yeah, so there's the condos so then the light is up this way, shows where the parking. Challenge is, in the morning, for us to go to work, you might still have a little bit more congestion. So we might actually, like speaking about the island, you might widen it a little bit more. Because if you look, so we look now, that would be hard, yeah, just so there's a little bit of space as far as going. So that's part of that. Yes, yeah.
Smiling today?
How are you?
I have a Peter Pan play to go to tonight. It's in, Farmington. It's in Royal. Big production. That's nice. She is basically
this a new?
a mermaid,
Is that the same one?
an Indian, and something. One of the plugs are.
Oh, down there. Oh, I did all, thank you. Yeah.
But if I'm not,
So, Jamie? Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Okay, so this is a one So, in 2016, that was they raised that much.
I'm gonna say
This is for the same tax. This is No, it's just,
I wouldn't do that.
it's just for this website.
No, actually, no, not one.
So this is as of like November 2nd, 2016, it was like October 2017. Okay, so I get that information. So they set their rate, 2016, that rate went down this month.
Oh.
Now, the rate went down to that, but they're bringing the rest of the.
Here's the best thing, I think what you're saying, I need to assume that everything we said before went in one ear and out the other. Because as soon as they saw that scary stuff, they thought basically everything we said. Of course, we live this every day, so we're approaching, but they forgot it all. And we need to go right back to the present. Well said.
I just remember the impression we were all of them. We have plenty to do. So it depends on where. We were gonna meet a month ago after the meeting with law, and I said, so they chose to go with the rate, which is fine, because, you know, on the board, I'm only guaranteed 4
Okay.
months on the state side. But so maybe we raise the issues though.
Am I supposed to be sitting down at what time was that?
8:02. We're 8 minutes behind.
Okay.
Just
I
saying.
was here, and I
Just
went over
saying.
that.
I think just saying is like the most passively aggressive thing you can ever say. Just saying.
That's the question I got, was that one piece of it. So you have to look at the
I'm
total.
gonna bring a ice pick next time.
Brandon, I need to end right now, but we'll get to work and we'll get that to you. Thank you, sir. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Linda has been summoned as well. From the-
Linda, we have a quorum. We are proceeding. Okay, item 1.5, Deputy Jones.
Okay, sir, item 1.5 is non-LEA monitoring report. It is in the backups, it's displayed for you by Jamie, and Jamie will address this particular agenda.
Judy Barrett, Middle School Program Administrator. Part of the board's duty is to monitor not only LEAs, but our non-LEAs who also receive federal grant funds from us. We look at a process that we've established every year is looking at all of our entities, regardless of LEAs or non-LEAs. So in March, we reported on LEAs financial reporting. So this report is focused on non-LEAs. And what we mean by non-LEAs is basically universities, ATCs, and other nonprofits that we send federal dollars from our agency directly to them as we are the prime recipient. We look at anyone with uniform guidance, anyone that spends over $750,000 in federal expenditures is required to get a single audit. We look at their financial audit, we review single audits and management letters, and we're looking to see if they have any findings with any of the programs that are sending them federal dollars. This year, we identified about 214 non-LEAs. Of that, we established a threshold of anyone that we had sent $100,000 to or more. We looked at their audits. If we noticed any findings from those audits, we followed up with corrective action letters and reviewed them. We had 2 entities that actually had findings. The city of Salt Lake had a finding pertaining to the 21st Century Community Center Learning Centers. And the auditors noted, their auditors noted that the city did not have any written federal policies for governing grants. Our CTE section, or our 21st Century section is aware of this. They're following up with the city to get those policies in place, and they're also monitoring the reimbursement requests to make sure that they're used in accordance with the requirements of the federal grant. The other entity that had a finding is Salt Lake Community College. It was in regards to the CTE program, and their auditors noted that they didn't have proper internal controls over suspension and debarment, and then internal controls surrounding the reimbursement request. So the CTE section administration is also aware of these findings. They're following up with the college and actually providing some training to them and monitoring, in addition, monitoring the reimbursement request to make sure that they're following in line with the requirements of the grant. So we just wanted to present our monitoring to you for approval.
For formal approval?
Yes. By the board.
Okay.
Chair?
Uh-huh.
So the staff respectfully request a motion along the lines of that the Finance Committee recommends to the Board of Education in their June meeting to approve the report, the monitoring report.
So moved.
Well, sorry, I can't make that motion.
Oh.
Well, I guess you can, but that's really what we're seeking, so.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion that we request the board to approve the non-LEA monitoring report in our June meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Before we move on to the next thing, I have one question. Something that's come to my attention recently that's kind of interesting is, I think, for example, when you pay your taxes, if the IRS, disputes that you've paid a fair amount, if you can show a letter from like your tax attorney or your accountant saying, I went through this with a professional and they said I did it right, IRS still might disagree and stuff, but the penalties typically are not as severe because they're like, okay, you were genuinely operating in good faith. I think we might be moving sometimes into areas with our LEAs where their professional advisors, either maybe internal or external, sometimes believe that they are doing the right thing, unlike, federal accounting and some other things, but we might disagree. Am I delusional? I think on Ascent specifically that may have been the case.
Yes, that would be the case with them. We had
Okay.
a misunderstanding or a
Mhm.
miscommunication that we are,
Mhm.
arriving to a place with them and working on that. This is, for these items, these were things
Yeah.
that were noted specifically by these entities'
Yeah.
external auditors.
That's exactly.
Mhm.
So, but I just think it would be helpful, just so we know kind of the range of severity, if there is ever a disagreement between maybe the professional advisors and our perspective, to maybe just highlight that going forward, because that is very interesting. And I am don't you guys back down for a second, just because they're some fancy accounting firm or law firm and they say so, that doesn't mean you have to show deference to them. But it does show to some extent that they're not as wayward of a child as they might otherwise be.
Which is why we brought the Ascent issue
Yeah,
to you.
and I think that's great, but that was, I think, it was an interesting issue. And once again, please, Minister, I have a conflict of interest on Ascent. I represent them, so don't do any, I won't vote on that or anything. But I thought it was very interesting from an intellectual perspective. So yeah, if that's ever the case, note that and why, they're either internal or external people thought they did it right, even if we disagree. Because I just think that shows that they're not.
Chair,
There's
if you
trouble.
have a conflict of interest, can I just throw something to your attention?
Please.
If you have a conflict of interest and you want to disclose that, but you don't participate in the debate
Mhm.
or the vote, so you're kind of in gray right now. If you
I
have a
may
conflict of interest.
slightly disagree in that we're not talking about voting on them. I brought that up
I
as
know,
kind of a
but-
point to
but you're-
illustrate
But
it.
you're, part of the discussion debate is given kind of instruction or trying to get, I'm not sure where you were trying to go, but it was like you were given instruction. I might have wrong,
Okay.
so I'm just wanting to help you.
That's fine. I'd say going forward, if ever, because the Ascent was an interesting case, if their professional or internal advisors disagree, to make sure that that's noted. Because I think that's relevant information for us to consider.
I think we should make that an agenda item instead of just pontificating on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just,
So, I mean, if we're
Because
gonna.
I'm asking them just to simply bring that to our attention going
Mhm.
forward.
Mhm.
yeah, any agreement, not any disagreement.
We could fall into a rabbit hole with that one.
So
I
what
hope
you're
not.
asking for is
Uh-huh.
if, and through all this, they say, no, we did it right, and this is,
Mhm.
if that's noted somehow in the
Mhm.
report,
Yeah.
that's what you're asking that to be part of the information that's presented to you.
Yes,
If that's
Okay.
Got that.
because I think that's very material for our deliberation process. Okay,
I'll write it down.
anything further on 1.5?
Not from staff.
Okay. Item 1.6.
Sir, item 1.6, it is an action item. Staff are respectfully requesting that we defer action on this particular agenda item until next month. What we're looking to do here is to get board approval to essentially write off the remaining balance of a revolving loan. Related to this particular agenda item, which is important for your consideration during this month though, is the question about whether or not during school closures, or the process of school closures, can the board or the staff act as trustees? This was something that you had brought up, sir, Chair Wright, in the past. I would like to David Thomas to have stayed here for this, but what the indications are is that yes, we can be a trustee, but it would actually benefit us more if we had that by code or rule. If you'd invite, because Jennifer's gonna have to speak to 1.7 as well, so if she could come forward a little bit, because I do want to ask some questions for her that I think is for the good of the committee as well, along these trustee lines, and see if there's any considerations we might have missed in following up with the data and information request that you had related to the trustee parts. Kairos was a school closure. We are still having to work with them, which Natalie was a big part of that, but because she's out with her father, who's had some surgeries and some health concerns, she hasn't had quite enough time to close up on the action step that we need to take with Kairos to with Kairos to write off the remaining loan balance. But Jennifer, do you have any concerns or questions about whether or not the board could become the trustee? And then, because what we're talking about here is that the ability of the board and or the board staff to enter into the closure process and become the trustee for the liquidation of funds, or, basically taking over the accounts, the bank accounts, if you will, or all that too on that. Do you have any questions or concerns about where we're headed with that? It will take some potential code or rule changes, because that's the point we're at, and coming back to his questions about that, but we'd like to hear your concerns, if any, at this point with that.
So Director Lambert, Jennifer Lambert, Director for the State Charter School Board. Just what you mentioned of needing legal counsel, I think that's what we would kind of look at the attorneys of what this would mean, what it would do, what it would obligate, or all those kinds of questions. So I don't have any opinions either way at this moment. It would be just talking to the lawyers of what this would mean.
And I appreciate you, Joe, bringing this up, because it's kind of a hole that we have. There's this bigger hole. It's kind of like this black hole or vacuum of what do we do, how do we do it. But it would be good to work. We can work with our legal on our side, but we also, with the state charter board, we need to work with them too. There's got to be a way that as a school is being flown into the ground, at what point, what triggers what to become what. And then if we end up being the trustees, what are the liabilities? What are the risks associated with it? What are our duties and authorities? Are they limited to A, B, C, D, or whatever it is? But I think that discussion needs to be had in a very open meeting. And I can't think of a better place than finance to probably start that discussion. So it's bigger than just what our attorney, there's some operational pieces of it too, I think, that need to be considered. So if we do get a report on it, or if we do try to work something out, we should have all the players. Here, so we're not taking a path that somebody else is saying, hey, wait a minute. Because we're not the trustees yet, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so, if I may, Chair, what staff are respectfully requesting is a motion by the Finance Committee that the AGs for the Utah State Board of Education and the AG for the State Charter School Board, which is currently David Jones, will combine their efforts to come back to you to speak in more detail about what would need to be changed, if anything, in code and or rule to legally allow the Utah State Board of Education and or its staff to become trustees for school closure activities. Which would imply the ability to take over particular bank accounts or all of those types of things that they would need to lay out for you, starting with the June meeting as its own perpetual agenda item until we come to terms. Again, I'm not sure what they would need to change in code, all that too. We'd leave that up to them, but that's the motion that we're seeking from you as an action by the Finance Committee, so that they're directed to do what I just explained, if that makes sense. To carry that further, we would need them to collaborate and to come back and further develop this with you as part of an ongoing or perpetual agenda item. We feel that it's early enough to where if there has to be code changes that they recommend, we could set the conditions for the next legislative session to do so.
Would it be safe to have, could this be can I make a motion, Chair?
Yeah, I'd like a little more discussion, but go.
Okay, let's throw out the motion. Here, I'd like to make a motion that we have USBE AGs get with the state charter board AGs to collaborate and come back with recommendations to this committee on what we need to do to be, what USBE needs to do to become the trustees or board of trustees.
Okay. I like that.
Closing school, closing charter school.
Yeah.
That'd be my motion. Does that cover it?
And maybe before we vote on that, Director Lambert, I'm really interested in maybe this thought. What if the State Charter School Board had the power, if they ever saw severe material financial mismanagement, or either that or preliminary, the school may be shut down, and they could just make a finding, boom, right there, and with that finding, then the finances all of a sudden get substantially curtailed. The board doesn't have the authority to enter into contracts or to amend their budget, essentially, without the approval of the State Charter School Board. So that you have a power, as soon as you see something that's, like just a horrific audit or something, or Salt Lake Tribune, director steals $300,000 and is, last reported flying to Mexico. Or even, I think there's, director commits suicide after, misleading the board for months. You see a situation, so you could immediately, within, promptly take over a school. Because as you appreciate it, we have like a 3-month process, anything is gone. Do you think, are we asking you to do it's like maybe asking me to climb Mount Everest. I just can't do that. Does that sound crazy? Or is that a power you think would be useful?
So we've spoken about that, and that's just where it's coming from. I think that the big concern is what does that mean in terms of liability? And I think that that's what I want to, get more information on. It's, I guess if you guys want to take on that question and take on the possible liability, that's why I couldn't respond and can't really answer to all these questions, because I don't know what that means in terms of liability.
I understand. It's America, so anyone can sue for anything, but it's not. You'd basically take all the contracts and obligations and evaluate and say that there are sufficient resources to pay all these. Yeah, and if not, then you might have to start, saying we're paying this one or not paying this one, and that's true. That's then when you get sued. But I think once you find that they don't have enough assets to meet their obligations, you declare kind of a closure process and stop kind of payments to everyone until you say, okay, everybody's getting 87 cents on the dollar or something. But it's always going to be extremely messy. It's never going to be clean. You know, no one kills themselves in a clean way. Board Member Reevy.
So this is, how do we compensate the schools that are absorbing these kids? I don't see that conversation being had either. We just assume that they're just gonna go to a school and there's gonna be open spaces for them. And, you know, we have this emerging charter school fund where we can help support a charter school as it grows. But as one shuts down, you have to assume that any school that's accepting them doesn't have 80 spots, 50 spots, 100 spots waiting. So what are we doing to make sure that as they leave one spot in a hectic situation, that they're being given an opportunity to add another one? Because it's not just moving from spot to spot. It doesn't work that way. I mean, I think you think it does, but it doesn't. It's not that easy. So if a public school is nearby and they have to absorb all those kids, what resources are we giving the neighborhood schools so that they can absorb these kids seamlessly? Are we going to provide them with an FTE right away? Are we going to provide them with any resources whatsoever, or are we just assuming the district just assumes the cost right away? Because it's not seamless. It's painful. And I would say that these students in this school, they have no place to go because the spot that they were at was closed. They went to this charter school, and now the spot that they were at closed, and the new spot they're supposed to go to is nowhere near the spot they used to be at. So as an educational institution, our mission is to protect the students. So these students don't have any transportation because the spot that they used to go to is closed. And now their new school that they went to is closed, and now they're moving to another school. So, I mean, I know this is a human factor that we should look at. It's not about just providing a new spot for them to go to, but to have a safety net for them to go back to. So what are we doing to make sure that the schools that are absorbing these kids have the resources readily available? Because the schools that are now taking them in had their budgets fixed. Their FTE was fixed, their class sizes were fixed, their desks were, you know, these are not free-flowing items that just appear. So what are we doing for that?
Deputy Jones?
So conceivably, by way of the further analysis that we need from the AGs, which you made that motion to do, by way of us becoming the trustee, if there's certain funds left in the account, there conceptually or conceivably, we might be able to, if we were able to basically go in and seize those funds, to transfer them ultimately to the new or gaining units or school. That, it's a concept. It's not, you know, we'd have to further develop that to answer that question on whether the legalities of that, the liabilities that would be associated with that could be conducive to. Because we always want to make sure too that we're actually, you know, providing parental and student choice of where they end up. So it would be difficult for me to say, well, there is a process in place to where we could, you know, mete out the funding that otherwise could work in a real-time fashion. Because I think Jamie could explain to you. Go ahead. Yeah. She's scared now because I'm saying all this. She's like, what are you doing to me, Scott? So, no, but go ahead. I mean, if we could hear from Jamie too on that part, Chair. So.
Please.
Currently, we don't have a appropriation unit that says, you know, appropriation line item for, you know, help for closure schools. I mean, we have ones for startups, which is true. Funding line items right now are dictated based on formulas and statutes, so there's not really anything that would go towards those. So I think that is an excellent question and one that we probably need to explore a little further.
Because my choice is to have my kid in a school that has 30 kids, it's my neighborhood school, my kid gets on the bus, but then the charter school next to me closes, and all of a sudden, instead of having a high number already, I'm gonna have 40 because we don't have the FTE right now, we don't have the desks. So I appreciate choice, but people that go to their neighborhood schools make a choice as well.
Right.
And your choice shouldn't negatively impact my choice in any way, shape, or form. So that's just my concern, because this happened with Alianza. Our school, near that school, just was flooded with kids immediately. And it was really hard on that school. So if we're gonna let's hold everyone harmless when we do this, please.
Director Lambert?
So, it is a very important consideration.
Mhm.
And I cannot speak for, way back in the past,
Yeah.
but it is something that if we are looking at where that could be a possibility, we are talking to the local districts,
Mhm.
we are talking to the surrounding schools and charter schools. And when, in the couple that we've had this come up,
Mhm.
the response is that they are welcoming them in, that there are mechanisms to do that. So it is a consideration that we undertake as we're looking at these issues. As far as
Respectfully-
what you do if it does happen, and I
Yeah.
cannot speak to
Yeah.
every situation because I was not
Yeah.
involved in every situation, but I just know that we are talking, we do work with them because our focus is the students. We
Mhm.
want good outcomes for those students,
Mhm.
and so we want to have them, we don't just want to close the school and then say, good luck, have fun. We're working and we're trying to find places for those students. That's
Mhm.
what we've been doing with Kairos
Mhm.
Academy, is that we've been working, a lot of them went to other surrounding charter schools. We were talking with surrounding districts. So I think that is definitely something that can always be improved on, but
Mhm.
it is something that I know the State Charter School Board does look at very
Mhm.
carefully.
Because the charter schools.
Hold on, Board Member Reed.
Oh.
In response to, I think it's 100% valid. I think it's a totally valid complaint.
Mhm.
But the state charter school board has to balance also if students stay in that charter school
Mhm.
going forward, is theft or other bad things happening at the school.
Mhm.
So they have to counterbalance even the impact with, there are some negative things happening at school. Second, I do believe, even though those students flooded Granite and short-term funding is a problem, they do get funding for it. So
Mhm.
even if they come like, I don't know, November 17th,
Mhm.
the following year, they will get the funding, for taking that student on as of November 17th.
How does that negatively impact the student in my class or that class?
That,
A charter school doesn't have to take a student. The home district does have to take a student.
That is-
You cannot deny a student in your home boundaries.
absolutely,
So charter schools have
True.
said we are gonna have 20 to 25 kids in our classroom, we cannot accept you into our charter school. So you have determined that, and you will say, no, we can't accept you, we're full. District schools do not have that opportunity at all. So not only do they not have to say that, but if you come to my school, now I'm just using my student hypothetically because it's a neighborhood school. And the neighborhood school person now has maybe to have to split classes. Would you like your student to have to split classes in November because they closed a school nearby? It's traumatic. It is traumatic.
but if you look at the 15-year operating history of charter schools, this has been rare.
And I
Too
would like to
frequent,
say that it's
but rare.
not gonna happen, but maybe it happens more. I want safeguards in place so that a neighborhood school is being held harmless, because I hear that all the time with charter schools. We have to hold our students harmless. We have to hold every student harmless. And a neighborhood school should not be negatively impacted by the closing of a charter school, by creating different class sizes or whatever it is. I mean, we have to have a cushion in place. This is going to happen. And like right now, we're just touching the surface on it, and I don't know where this is gonna go, but we have to remember that the schools that are accepting these kids there's issues there. There are lots of significant issues, and I haven't heard that brought up. What about the receiving school?
I think it's valid point, only one charter school has been shut down during the school year, to my knowledge, in the last 15 years. So it's
But
only
even-
happened once.
But even Kairos, where are these
It
people
was
going
shut down at the end of the
with
year.
their children? They're very, very unique students that left a unique program, created a unique program. Where is this unique service now?
Do you want this, we're going way
Yeah,
off
we're
topic.
at
If you
the
want
weeds.
this to be an agenda item for
Yep,
next month,
okay.
we can make it. Director Lambert?
Just one suggestion, when Alianza closed, there were
Mhm.
charter schools that were willing to take those students, but
Mhm.
because of their caps,
Mhm.
they could not, and there was actually one that went and requested an
Mhm.
increase in their cap, and it was denied. So, I know that now that the approvals are changing, and so that may take care of itself, but I think that also look at ways where charter schools could, who are willing to, and could also take some of that.
Increase their
impact.
caps.
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be great. Please.
Just, I think it goes back to a timing issue,
Mhm.
right? Like, we need to make sure that we have those guardrails
Mhm.
in place, that if a charter school is experiencing those criteria that are
Mhm.
leading them down that road,
Mhm.
that we make sure that the timing of these events happen,
Mhm.
so we can then prepare, whether that's making sure that they're going somewhere, funding's in place, to be
Mhm.
able to help them. So it's, I think a lot of it has to do with timing.
I agree.
Okay, I think we're back to Chair Huntsman's motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pass unanimously, thank you. Director Lambert, should we just keep you up here for 1.7, or Deputy Jones, I defer to you?
1.7 is covered by Executive Director Lambert.
So, I,
I'm
we
sorry,
may in the
Jen,
future.
Which one do you want us to pull this up, or?
Either one, or yeah, either one. So, just a little background, this may in the future, you may wanna just put this on your consent calendar. This is basically the early intervention funds, according to statute and board rule, it requires that the funds for charter schools be distributed to the schools with the greatest need for an enhanced kindergarten program. And so the State Charter School Board looked at, well, how would we define greatest need? And we had 4 criteria, and in order. So we first looked at the percentage of students having sufficient prerequisite knowledge and skills coming into kindergarten. So we used the KEEP assessment. You can see that's that first one there. Then the second thing we looked at is the percent of students who are English learners. And then we looked at the percent of students who are economically disadvantaged. And then we did look at whether or not they received prior year funding under the idea that we don't want schools to have, they've got a program for 1 year and then they don't the next year and then they do the following year. We want some continuity. So they were in the rank order there. You see the kind of how that came down. We then looking at the past data, past years, and just thinking through because we want to give enough money that can help them actually do something with the money, but not so much that one school would take all of the money and then we end up only giving it to one school. So we put a cap of $30,000. If they requested less, great, but we capped them at $30,000 per classroom. So we figured that was sufficient. Then if you go to the next,
Maybe I'm still, and they use the $30,000 for full day kindergarten, or what do they use the money
That's
for?
what the majority do.
Okay.
They do it for full day
Mhm.
kindergarten, but they have to submit kind of their budget
Okay.
and their plan, and that's part of it. So if you look here, you can see that we actually had requested quite a bit more than what we had to give. We had to give about $860,000, $70,000, and we had $420,000 more that was requested that we were not able to give. But based on those criterias, you can see the line there, and that is what the State Charter School Board recommends be funded.
So that's where you chose to draw the line.
Well, that's where the data, where it fell.
And what is the scoring? Like, I don't see the scoring, I see
So
scoring,
that is
but-
on the page above of how it comes out. So if you look, so first we look at the KEEP assessment. And if they have less than 50% of students coming in with the sufficient, with the determined levels, then they would be ranked 1. Between 50 and 75% would be ranked 2, etc. Then we looked at the percent of English learners. So if they have more than 23%, that would be ranked 1, etc. Then we looked at the economically disadvantaged, and then we looked at prior year funding. So that's how we did that.
All right, so it wasn't like who's friends with Director Lambert, it was objective criteria.
So
That
are we using the
seems
same
reasonable.
criteria for our neighborhood schools as we are for our charter schools, or charter schools came up with their own criteria for how to get this?
So the criteria for charter schools in statute is
Mhm.
different. And Jamie could speak to the criteria of how districts are funded, but charter schools, it is in statute, and it states it's in 53F-2-507, and then your board rule, our to charter schools with the greatest need for an enhanced kindergarten program. And so this is how we felt was the best way to operationalize it, to get away from what Chair Wright was talking about. It's not about who knows me or who we like. It's about what the data says.
So there was a percentage of the money that went to charter schools and they had to divvy it up? Okay, yeah.
Correct. In statute, it says based on student population, that percentage of population for charter schools is
Okay.
times by that appropriation, and then that money goes to charter schools for doing the greatest need.
Okay.
Whereas school districts, it's based on a formula in statute.
Okay, because that's, I know the formula that we have, but I wasn't sure. So you created a different formula for your, okay.
And-
Excellent, thank you.
Good.
Do we need to take an action on this?
I think so.
Okay. I move to accept the early intervention grant awards for charter schools.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, Director Lambert. We are on time. So we're on item 1.8, Deputy Jones.
Sir, we basically followed up with you on your data and information request as part of the Kairos agenda item. Again, related to the Kairos agenda item, we do have to come back for further action next month, contingent upon Natalie's able to meet with who's representing Kairos to go through some of the details as far as what is the amount to write off. So we'll follow up again on that next month. So at this point, the staff's open up to any data and information requests that you need for subsequent months. Is there any from the remaining members of the Finance Committee here?
And I want to disclose to Board Member Reed, Board Member Hudson, I've now set up a monthly meeting. We've actually scheduled a phone meeting with Deputy Jones for the rest of the year, where we talk about the agenda of the Finance Committee before it goes up to you for final approval. We just found that seems to work better. So if either of you, I don't think we should have more than 3, but if either of you ever want to join that phone call or have any items, you are very welcome. I want to be absolutely 100% transparent.
Especially word
Um, Anyway, it helps, I think it helps me be a better chair. I appreciate Deputy Jones being willing to do that. I think that's all, though, unless anyone else wants to talk about anything.
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.